All right, we are live. I see people coming in, so we'll just give it a little more time. But welcome to today's webinar of James, Lucas, and myself. I'm the head of marketing here at LeadIQ, and I'll let the speakers introduce themselves in just a moment. But we wait for more people to come in. I see more people coming in. Feel free to drop in the chat where you're dialing in from. And also, if you want to share who's your favorite sales influencer on LinkedIn, who you follow on LinkedIn, sales guru, sales expert. So drop that into the chat. I'd love to see who everyone follows. James, Lucas, who do you guys follow on LinkedIn? Who's your sales guru, your sales influencer?
I'd say I'm a big fan of Kyle Coleman. Does a lot of great outbound messaging, specifically towards SDRs that I think is great. Will Allred as well from Lavender, two of my favorites for sure.
I think for me, it's Kevin Dorsey. I've always been a big fan of his. And the nice thing is he does the crossover that lessons that both inside sales, but also prospecting SDRs, BDRs can learn from as well. So it's really a great education for both worlds. So I've always gravitated towards his content.
Awesome. Yeah, I follow a guy named Dave Kellogg. I don't know if you heard of him. He has his own blog too, but he writes a lot of marketing stuff. So I really enjoyed his marketing thoughts. But then there's another guy, Matt Cameron. He has the Sassy newsletter, Sassy Thoughts newsletter. So not a good sales guy to follow on LinkedIn. I see we have more people coming in. Just some quick housekeeping items. Of course, we are recording this webinar and it will be available to you after the session today. If you have any questions for the speakers, you can drop them into the Q&A or the chat. We'll try to go through the questions as we go along in today's webinar, or we'll try to answer most of your questions at the end of this webinar. Anthony, if you want to drop in the first poll, I just kind of want to see where everyone's at in terms of their planning for 24, whether you have started yet or not started yet. So we'll wait for some poll answers to come in. All right, some people have started. That's great. 90%, 9 votes. So they have started. So it's good. It looks like the majority has started. 2024 is only 7 weeks away. And there's some major holidays in between. So time is running up pretty quickly to get started for 24. Plus, we still deal with a lot of economic uncertainty in next year. Win rates are dropping, pipeline generation is getting harder and harder. And I don't know if you guys just saw the news, but February 1st, Google's dropping any company that's doing a lot of spam automatically. So that's going to have a big impact on sales team, SDR teams. James, Lucas, actually, Anthony, do you mind dropping the next poll? I want to see what everyone in the audience sees as the big challenges for 24. And I want to ask James and Lucas, what do you see as the big challenges for you and your team in 24? James, you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. I think there's the tie, we were talking about it earlier, the tie for me between SDR enablement or coaching and development, as well as remote versus hybrid management. SDR enablement's always been, in my experience of doing this a long time, an afterthought for organizations. And I feel like as SDR teams get bigger and bigger, really need to focus in on the enablement. And I've even seen organizations hiring sales enablement professionals that only focus in on the SDR team. So it's a great thing. If you don't have that luxury, please speak for enablement team to really get that track going. Then also remote and hybrid. I've seen a lot of companies going back into the office, even finding new locations to consolidate their teams into new geographies. I think inside sales and sales development teams were the biggest victims of COVID. Everybody going remote, you miss out that osmosis, that team dynamic, the lunches, the after work, going out for happy hour kind of thing. So I think those are two big subjects for me that I've been discussing a lot recently, but I think those are challenges that can be overcome with you putting your ducks in a row.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both those. I'd say the two I'm looking at the most or thinking about the most are market competition and saturation for sure. I came previously from the analytics space, which was a very crowded market, and now I'm in the AI space. And I think a very common term you're going to see a lot these days is AI for blank. So I think it's going to be a really competitive market and one where it's going to take some time, I think, for folks to really separate themselves from other organizations. So if you're in that market, beginning to think about what that looks like is obviously gonna be really important. And then hitting revenue goals based on what you said earlier, where the economy is at. I think that's going to be harder for a lot of organizations. And I think what we've seen from the trends thus far is that what have been maybe some of the traditional ways of selling SaaS, selling enterprise SaaS, it's different now. And when you see the rise in sort of product-led growth, product-led sales, how does that sort of tie into that? How can you help organizations, help prospects you're working with evaluate your product on their own terms in their own time, the way that they want to, without necessarily falling into sort of the traditional sales motion? And I think the organizations that find a way to perfect that art are going to be really successful. So those are some trends that I'm looking at for sure.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. It looks like the audience is very in line with what you guys said, lead generation, prospecting, and hitting revenue goals. Definitely some of the bigger challenges for 24. And I hope with today's conversation, we can figure out some ways for the audience to overcome some of these challenges. I want to dive into the meat of today's webinar and talk about planning for 24. First item that I want to discuss, how you guys go about setting goals, forecasting, setting the right strategies for 24. And James, through our rehearsal, you mentioned one thing that you do pretty thoroughly, which is like you do very thorough analysis, very thorough research before you do your planning. Do you want to elaborate on your planning process and how the research analysis fits into that?
Yeah, happy to. So first and foremost, it starts with the partnerships of sales and marketing leadership. And as those conversations begin planning for the new year, I've seen companies start as early as August for the following year. But figuring out what their goals are going to be, what the pipeline goals are, the product focus, et cetera, for the new year, and how we can start the engine ramping up and figure out creative ways of behind the scenes. So the moment you hit January 2nd, you really hit the ground running. So you take that and combine it with historical data. So if you got a new SDR team, it's a little bit more difficult because you don't have the historical data to keep one leg standing on to really have that solid answer. But if you have the data that's reliable, you can really understand what those ratios are between those soft success metrics like emails, phone calls, live phone calls, email responses to the solid, what I call them commissionable KPIs of meetings and or new opportunities generated for our counterparts. But then also the question to start getting asked, are there ways to not only align with the goals of sales and marketing, but once we deliver those goals, especially in the enterprise world, how do you stay tied to those results to help advance them forward, not just a baton handoff? I think that the short answer is align your goals based upon historical data, but also the future goals of what the board and your leadership is doing today. Making sure you have the right people that are in seats today. Do you need more headcount to align to the goals that you're projecting to align to for the new year? And you have the tech, the enablement, even the numbers of sellers. We're half the equation. So you can have the argument of, do you need to go get more headcount for sales and the prospectors as well? So that's like the high level response for his planning, but that's how we take the first few steps.
Yeah.
You mentioned like you're looking at the historical data. What are some of the data points you actually look at?
I look at anything possible. One of the great things, happy accidents, I started off doing sales development as an SDR in 2006, a long time ago. No automation back then. But it was all about ratios, and anything you could capture back then was the lesson of like, all right, how many phone calls and emails to created meeting? How many meetings that were created that actually took place? And then adding in what was the quality of meeting? What was the content that led to that meeting being set? Anything you can get your hands on, those are like the invisible levers to push and pull at any given time throughout a year, but literally how I look at it, how planning for the new year of like, all right, these are the big levers you're going to push and pull. Is the business focusing on new business separate from existing or combined in a hybrid? Are we getting great on inbound? We're going to push on outbound. So anything metric wise that I can get my hands on, I'll take a look at and see what the value is for that planning process. But then make sure you filter it out. And when you're speaking about it with your colleagues and counterparts, make sure you bring the juiciest and the most valuable aspects of that data you can collect.
Awesome. Lucas, how does it look for you guys? How do you guys plan for the year?
Yeah, I got a very similar process to James, and I really like what he said. But I think to expand on what he was saying, you're looking for sort of the efficiencies that you have in the data. So it's not just about the volume, it's not just about the totals, it's not just about the quantities. It's about, how many pieces of activity did it take to get to the outcomes that you're looking for? How many people did it take to get there? So one of the things I really like to look at is not like the total number of meetings we generated, total number of opportunities we generated, total number of amount of pipeline we generated. It's how much per rep we had in seat. Maybe you had a lower quantity, but you had a smaller team, and actually that team was a lot more efficient than when you had a larger team, maybe a couple quarters in the past. Or maybe you see that as headcount has changed over time, the amount of meetings generated per rep has actually stayed flat. That reducing hasn't been able to generate more meetings per rep. So if you know that's going to essentially remain flat, then based on historical numbers, to achieve a certain quantity that you want to get, you might need more people in seat. So I think those are some of the numbers that I like to look at. It's important to try to figure out where historical numbers can help you project for the future, and where maybe you need to think about like how we're going to change those numbers, and not necessarily rely on those as what the trend should be moving forward. For example, if you look at your numbers and you look at your close rates, and based on some of that stuff historically, we actually need 10x pipeline versus the 3 or 4 or 5x that a lot of organizations think that they need. Okay, maybe that's fine. But if we look at that number in terms of how many opportunities that means for an SDR team, maybe that puts it at 50 opportunities per SDR, and that's an unachievable number. So do we need to either hire more people, or do we need to work really closely with the sales team to understand how do we generate higher quality of leads that lead to a better close rate? What can the AEs and the sales team be doing to make sure that they're being as effective as possible within their sales cycles? So it's something you have to look at from the whole picture rather than just purely numbers on a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I'd also to add on to that, 100% agree with everything. The other question to ask to the colleagues in sales and marketing is what kind of pipeline and opportunity goals do the sales reps have too? Because it cannot be a one-sided thing. Both prospectors and sellers need to actually prospect, especially since AEs typically have a lot more time in the game. They probably have more relationships. They already have relationships and accounts they're already in touch with, right? But totally agree with that. And then also the big thing to consider is, are we paying SDRs the right way? Are we paying on the right KPIs? Are we paying enough, too little? The real goal for me from early days is incentivizing the right behaviors will get you the right results, which makes your internal customers happy. Rinse, repeat. But yeah, because I'm on board with everything you said. I've done this a few times, and it's a lot of fun this time of the year to be able to plan for the coming year. So.
Now, guys, like I know we still have very much like an economic uncertainty ahead of us. How do you guys factor this into your planning for the next year? Do you give it like your goals a little more buffer, your forecast a little more buffer, or how do you factor it in?
It's definitely a moving target. It's something that we're definitely experimenting with internally at Labelbox, I'd say right now, and making sure that we are doing something that is competitive and drives the right incentives towards the goals we want to set SDRs towards and set the organization towards, without potentially putting them in a hole from an earnings potential. There's definitely different things you need to take a look at, but apart from just targets, I think you also just need to make sure that you're setting your team up for success as much as possible in terms of tech stack you have in place to help support them, and also just the market that you're able to point them towards. Do you have a good understanding of your ICP? Do you feel like you have a good amount of accounts for them? Do you feel like you maybe have given them too many accounts and you need to find a way to whittle that list down to give them the true total addressable market that is the best set of accounts for them to go after? So I think when you think about success and setting your team up for success, it's not just the targets you set them up with, it's also what are you pointing them towards, and how are they working towards that list, towards that target?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think George, if you can answer that question, you've got a crystal ball and you're probably going to be the
Yep.
richest person on earth in the next 12 months, right? We're only this first whatever X percentage of the sales cycle is concerned. But yeah, so as far as I'm concerned, quarter long timeframes, you've got some flexibility. Because we don't know, because we're in uncertain times, you do have that flexibility timeframe wise to adjust, increase, decrease, etc. Even completely redo the model. We did this at Venafi for Q4. We redid the model for the end of the quarter to align to what we want to do for next year. I also will say all things account based. I don't like calling account based marketing because it's not marketing. It's all things, everyone account based, especially in the enterprise world. Identifying your ICPs, and more oftentimes than not, I'm going to get the percentage number wrong, but I'll just generically say, I think it's over 70% through the sales cycle, the decision-making process is at the point where on average, a vendor gets in touch or is able to have a conversation with their prospective buyer. So they're already far further than even back when I was an SDR. People didn't know what SaaS was back then. Yes, I'm old, but the point is that you got to get in front of every single person that could touch your product, have an influence, decision maker, buyer. It's all the sales development 101, but you got to combine that with all things account based intent data. I think honestly, that's really the future where especially in the enterprise space will go. If you're just blindly firing into the night, you're going to have a really tough time cold calling. But if you're using intelligence coming from the data, especially partnering with your account-based marketers, account-based team, you're going to be far more successful getting traction in those accounts in a even more competitive market than ever before. We've got a great account-based marketer he's awesome. He's doing more things than I've ever even thought of and getting me inspired to really align the team with that mentality more so than I've ever planned before. So yeah, you know what? Good question. We could talk about this for hours.
Yeah, I'm sure we could. Yes.
You mentioned of saying we don't know, but
Yeah. Nobody. You mentioned a bunch of tools like intent tools, intent signals, but do you use specific tools for the forecasting, for the planning, or is mostly just done out of spreadsheets? How do you guys handle that?
I like Salesforce, to be honest. It is the source of truth.
Yep.
SDRs, it enters real time. You don't have to rely upon, like, you're using Tableau, for instance. You got to wait for it to recycle. Great, cool, wonderful. It can do far better reporting and graphical analysis than Salesforce can. But I have to rely upon, because the SDRs are going at a quick clip, I guess you could say. You've got to rely on Salesforce. We use a couple other things for sales as well. But yeah, I think demand base has been a big investment for us, as well as for getting the intent data, bring it into kind of forecasting. But we use a number of different things depending upon the audience we're talking to. So for me, my team, Salesforce, my immediate leadership, Salesforce and Tableau, and then mostly Tableau for the executive leadership.
Yeah, similar stack over here. Doing vast majority for my team. For myself, I'd say out of Salesforce as well. We utilize Looker for some more advanced reporting on the analytics side, using Clary on the forecasting and RevOps side. And then I'm certainly using a lot of spreadsheets. That's maybe more so just out of comfortability and being stuck in some of the old ways, but obviously love the flexibility of being able to do some more custom formula work and calculations and things like that. But yeah, I think to James's point, like one of the things that we're really looking to do moving forward is being more creative with pulling together all of the data that we have in some really unique and powerful ways to understand where all sort of the target accounts we're going after, where they're at in that life cycle. So that's utilizing tools like Sixth Sense and Demand Base. That's utilizing just the signals we're getting out of. That's utilizing other tools. We use a tool called Rev that helps us better understand our ICP accounts by doing some more advanced web scraping outside of the basic firmographic stuff you might be able to get out of like a Zoom info or something like that. So really just trying to pull all of that together to try to get an understanding of where are these accounts at in their life cycle and who is the warmest and most primed for us to go after.
Do your companies still do annual sales kickoffs? Are they still helpful for setting the right mindset for the beginning of the year? Do you guys do that?
Yeah. I think for us coming out of SKO, people are energized. They're pumped up.
Mhm.
They're fired up. They know what's going to happen over the next 12 months with a vision, at least. No, nobody has a crystal ball again. But yeah, it's a big deal for us.
Do you guys have
Yeah.
any advice how to make them successful? I've sat through many sales kickoffs, some of them really good planned and actually really drive motivation and excitement for the rest of the year, but some of them not so well planned. Any recommendations there?
Yeah. I'd say one of the things that we're doing over here is just surveying everybody. What would you want to hear? What's
Mhm.
an important topic to you? And trying to crowdsource all of that and bring it all together. And some of the things we did a midway one this summer as well as summer summit. And we really try to think to do a good job of finding opportunities, finding sessions where the entire organization could be there together, but then finding times when it made sense to split off engineering from go to market and make sure that we're not putting people in rooms for long periods of time where they're listening to something that they either don't understand whatsoever or has nothing to do with their day to day.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything. I'd add on a couple of small things. One is if there is some sort of awards section portion of the SKO, make sure the SDR team is represented. Make sure you have your top performers get an award. And it's the same type of award as the top sellers, right?
Mm.
It can't be like, oh, you get a smaller award because you're an SDR. But it has to be, they're arguably doing one of the most difficult jobs in the company. They should be recognized for it for sure. And also having an SDR specific breakout session, just SDRs to do like team building, but to have it be like a fun contest. Or this past year, we did a March Madness bracket thing where they had a certain amount of time to be able to do like an elevator pitch to the CISO or whatever it may be, or then like an email template. And it creates a lot better and stronger way of kicking off a cultural kickoff for the SDR team. Especially if you've got global teams and they're not all in the same place at the same time very often.
Great. I know you guys mentioned a lot, like setting up your teams for success in 24. How do you guys think about like, team capacity, team quotas, coaching, all the stuff for 24?
I think it goes back to what we were talking about before with just understanding where you've been and where you're currently at and where you'd like to go. Once again, there is no crystal ball, but if and you have to do the backwards math of understanding what's the goal that we want to get to and break that down in terms of what we need to do to get there and what percentage of that needs to come from the SDR team. And do we have the SDR, the current capacity in place to achieve that? If not, is that just coaching development that we need to do, extra tool sets we need to bring on to facilitate that? Or is that additional headcount that's needed to bring on? So it's going to be completely different for each organization. But I think you really need to dig into the data and contemplate all those different sort of rocks you can pull up to look beneath versus just saying there's a simple answer, which is just more headcount, this one tool that we bring on, anything like that.
Yeah, I agree with everything Lucas said. You can't have a kind of peanut butter spread approach to it. You got to get into it to understand, okay, percentage of results. What is the ask of the SDR team this coming year versus what is currently in place? And I think if you're enabling your team, you're constantly trying to enable your team in any way, shape, or form. I try to have like guest stars jump in on our monthly global team calls, from internal team members at different departments to external people who are technically an ICP, like with my network. But I think if you're constantly trying to advance them when you're asking new things of them come the new year, it's not as big of an ask. But again, back to the original point of specific SDR enablement, it shouldn't be a once a quarter, once a year kind of thing. It needs to be like every day, every week. And one of the things we've also done is that we have something called, I think we called it playback and elevate. Once a week, the entire SDR team gets together and brings recordings or examples of objections they can't get over to help as a team collaborate. Not me, not anybody from enablement, but they get to come up with their own enablement to help educate themselves, because you're going to get far better experience and education in the game versus watching from the sidelines or reading in a book. It also really helps the culture of the team too. So like you can lean on them. We're going to ask more of you in January, and here's an idea. your code is never going to go down. No joke. But yeah, I think everything, like I said, I +1 and just as long as it's enablement or kind of a student mentality, it's not going to be a big ask if there are steps up. But yeah, headcount wise, consider those questions. If the ask of the business is greater than what you think you have today.
Yeah. And from a coaching, I like that you're talking about this from a coaching perspective, because I think that's a really important way to think about it. And obviously, like for leadership folks like us, like the longer you are in this role, the longer amount of time it's been since you've been a frontline person in most situations. So I think in a lot of cases, it's foolish for us to always think that we might know better, because obviously these things are changing very rapidly. Rather than thinking of myself as a manager, or even thinking of myself as a coach, sometimes I like to think of myself as a facilitator and helping get as much information, as much success stories from around the organization, the SDRs, anyone else that's doing this type of go-to-market work, and equipping everyone else with that. Here's someone who's winning this, doing this over here. Here's someone who's having success doing it this way over here. There's no silver bullet. Different people have different success in different ways. And I want to make sure that my team is equipped with all those different strategies. And if we find one that seems to be functioning more consistently, then I want to make sure that that's being utilized across the board. But if someone else has found something that works for them a bit more individually, I'm also going to let them experiment with that. I think experimentation and trying new things in this area is a consistent must.
When you look at measuring the effectiveness of your teams, do you see any shifts from year to year, or you guys stay pretty consistent with the numbers and metrics you guys look at?
I'd say it's
My quotas have never gone down.
Okay.
Yeah. It's always in the same ballpark, I'd say, and it's always within the same realm of the type of metrics it's typically based on. I'd say I've experimented with things over time and typically find myself falling back into the same wheelhouse every single time. I've experimented with seeing how many opportunities get to later stages in the opportunity life cycle and making that a part of the SDR quota model. Part of the issue with that is that you just typically see SDRs have little to no impact within that stage of a life cycle. So obviously we want to judge the SDRs on the quality of what they create. But if we're judging them or making their quota based on something that they have no impact on in many situations, I think it makes it difficult. And that, I think, in some situations can harm the motivation of an SDR when they feel what defines their success is completely outside of their control.
Yeah. And same here. Obviously you got to stay flexible in an uncertain time like we're in. We've changed the model a couple of times this year, which is different than the model we had last year and what we measured the team on. We got to understand, to Lucas's point, where our SDR is going to have the most traction, but also the highest velocity, but also produce the most value. And it's this kind of tipping balancing act that you got to do. If you're asking too much of them, they're going to tell you right away, and you're going to see the results go down, the motivation go down, the commissions go down. And I like to show an org chart of my team. It's upside down. I'm at the bottom because I all work for them. So I want to hear from them immediately if things are not working. But they all know going into the new year that targets, the adjustments, the increases are all for the business, not just to torture them. But I think giving them, to Lucas's point, give them a voice. That's one of the best parenting pieces of advice that mom gave me a long time ago. But it's true for leadership, especially with sales development reps and inside sales reps. Give them a voice. Let them have a little bit of an influence on what's going to happen next year. Okay, we're thinking about this. How comfortable do you feel with this? And give them kind of a strategic voice to really help out. The more I've given that empowerment to SDRs, the more success I've seen over the years, for sure.
Yeah. And show them the calculator. Show them here's the equation that we're utilizing to calculate this. And here's the assumptions that we're making. And here's the data that we're looking at. Entrust them with this information and don't just be here's the number coming down from high up above, deal with it. I like to give my teams, I like to be very transparent with them weeks in advance of, hey guys, it's looking like it's probably going to get increased potentially next quarter. for XYZ reasons. I think it's going to be still attainable, still reachable because I think we can do XYZ to make sure that we get there. We've already seen this going on. So just have a conversation with them about it, make sure they're included in it, make sure they understand it, make sure they've got as much advanced notice about that type of stuff as possible so they can wrap their heads around it.
Yeah.
That's the approach I like to take with it.
I know we talked a lot about goal setting, forecasting, and setting your team up for success. I want to get maybe a little more specific on go-to-market strategies. Are there strategies or tactics that you guys uh, deployed this year and guys carry over next year? Or there's some like new strategies you guys want to experiment? And then as a follow-up question is like, are you guys using any tools, any technology to help with enabling those strategies? Lucas, do you want to go first?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest changes I saw in terms of the strategy that my team's been utilizing at Labelbox versus what we were using at my previous company, SizeSense was very email and phone heavy because a lot of the people we're going after were much more business centric people and they were much more in tune with their email, much more in tune with their phone. And what we're targeting at Labelbox is much more on the engineering, the data science side. And those are people that are maybe not as always in tune with their business email as maybe you or me might be, not as in tune with utilizing their phone for work as maybe you and I might be. And where we've found getting in touch with those folks way more effective than email and phone is on LinkedIn. So it's been a change for me to like break out of my previous mindset of like, you got to be making all these dials every day and you got to be sequencing all these people every day. When we've seen that to be not super effective for the persona that we're going after. And LinkedIn's been super, super effective. So I would say it's important to, when thinking about strategies, not corner yourselves into your preconceived notions and assumptions, understand where you're truly getting your efficiencies from and double down or triple down in those areas. Just using straight up LinkedIn Sales Navigator has been a huge, great thing for us. We definitely are beginning to explore some potential automation tools in that sense. Obviously, there's some sales automation tools that specialize in LinkedIn selling. So that's an area that I definitely want to look into going into 2024 to make sure that we're maximizing our output there.
Quick follow-up question for you, Lucas, actually, before I let James chime in. But I feel like LinkedIn still has a lot of noise. How do you stand out in the noise that even we see on LinkedIn these days?
Yeah, it's for sure true. I would say just in terms of what I've seen, I still get pummeled on email than I do on LinkedIn personally, but I can't speak for other folks. It's just making sure that out of the gate with the messaging that you utilize, that there is some TLC that is shown. You've done your research, you've done your homework. I'm reaching out to you for a very specific reason because I noticed this, and here's how I think I can genuinely help with that, be a part of it. Is that relevant? Is that interesting to you? There's obviously a lot more functionality within it as well. You can do those big yard type videos within LinkedIn as well. There's this sort of like presentation now, like slides you can drop in as well. So you can get really creative in terms of how you use it beyond just connection requests and messages and emails and stuff like that. So those are definitely some ways you can think about it outside of just the standard sort of social networking aspect of it.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. James, what are some of the strategies you guys, will carry over from 23 or maybe experiment with in 24?
Yeah. So we are in the cybersecurity space, and it much like Lucas mentioned, we're calling it the more technical side of industry, right? People that probably don't have a desk phone or solutions like LeadIQ are huge for us because it offers up the sometimes when successful and available mobile phone numbers. I oftentimes find that SDRs hide behind technology and the automation to do the job for them. And again, I keep calling myself old, but back when I was an SDR, you pick up the damn phone and make 100 phone calls a day. And I'm like, why? Who cares? I want conversations. And I was an SDR twice. I was SDR for a while, then I went into sales, and it was 2008, and they were downsized, and they offered me my old job back as an SDR, but I had the Midwest, and the phone was my best friend because that was the one thing that differentiated me from everybody else, all my competitors calling in these same accounts. I'd say the success that my team has had has been largely because it's been a outbound strategy. It's been something that we can be very confident in. One of the advancements we did this year is investment into a power dialer with a virtual sales force. So the entire company is remote. So nobody's in the office ever, unless it's like SKO or QBR. So that has been a really big leg up. On top of it, they can hear each other's recordings. They can listen to each other while they're making calls. They can coach each other. I can do the same thing too. Even internationally, live calls aren't recorded, so it doesn't violate anything like GDPR or Castle laws in Canada. But to the point of LinkedIn, social selling is a big deal. And I like the indirect social selling that we leaned in on, like getting introduction through a mutual connection or bringing something up that has nothing to do with your product. Like, hi, I'm James with Venafi. Notice that X, Y, and Z. We've got a gifting platform as well. Here's a link to Coffee on Me. I'd love to do a lunch and learn with you about our products that fits in your wheelhouse. But ultimately, the team's constantly asking the rhetorical question: why would this person care about taking time out of their busy schedule to meet with us? And they're constantly redefining the answer with that. But we need to enable them with the strategy of outbound at the core, give them the technologies, not too many technologies, because I think the average SDR manages about 16 to 19 different technologies every day. I think that's too much. People buy from people, and every business is a people business. So if you're not utilizing the technologies like LinkedIn, the Sales Navigator that goes directly to the person, no spam filter, no gatekeeper, nothing, but you still have to make yourself more memorable or stick out from the rest of the noise to the point on LinkedIn. I don't answer cold emails in my inbox ever because it's a waste of my time. It's somebody content team created the template, put it in they didn't even write it, right? And then I'd say last thing with this coming year, personalization combined with account-based everything will be what I truly believe for my team would be what's going to make them successful and aligned to those new goals that are going to be rolled out. I'd say I agree with everything Lucas said. And, if you're enabling your team to ahead of schedule with the new strategies that are about to be rolled out with awareness of what that strategy will be, and hopefully with the foundation of what the strategy has been all year, this year, or even last year, it should be a smooth transition to the start of the year.
James, you mentioned you're relying on introductions to get in front of your prospect. Do you have any tools to facilitate that, or help you scale it up, or is it like a more one-off thing looking at LinkedIn connections?
There was, I don't know if it still exists. There's a couple different aspects to LinkedIn that allows you to see people's networks or see how to get the introduction through. I think one came and gone, but you mostly LinkedIn Sales Navigator. One of the exercises that I've done a few companies where I've encouraged team members to commit a half day or an entire day to just LinkedIn prospecting. Part of that is connecting with every single person in the company, looking at their network, or going to the companies on LinkedIn you want to get into, find the connections internally, because those of us have been around for a while, they got pretty big networks. Probably know somebody who knows somebody, or like my cousin's the CEO of that company, or my godfather was the founder of this, whatever, right? Yeah, for the most part, it's LinkedIn. It's doing your reviews each week, your one-on-ones of opportunities or accounts you're focusing on. Be like, hey, I know somebody over there. Let me connect you with my brother-in-law. He'll give you the introduction, in real world introductions too, which are helpful. But yeah, and nothing that's really hit the nail on the head technology wise, but other than LinkedIn Sales Navigator.
Yeah. And you mentioned personalization. Is that something that still works well? To what degree do you need to personalize? I still get emails like saying, "Hey, you went to that school, or you like that sports team."
I'm an easy target this time of year because I went to University of Michigan. Hey, Harbaugh. Hey, University of Michigan football. You're like, okay, what do you got for me? Like instantaneous credibility. But there's other things like if you don't go all the way through my LinkedIn profile, you wouldn't see that at one point I was a sommelier. So I'm a booze nerd. And it's an easy way of, hey, we'll give you a bottle of tequila if you give us 20 minutes. And be like, okay. Or if you do your research, it's pretty tough to find it, but I have a 6-month-old baby and I had 1 or 2 pictures out there on social media. hey, I'll send you a onesie, give me 15 minutes, and be like, cool, no laundry tonight. Like it's, you hit those buttons of that make you different. Than like, I'll give you $50 for 30 minutes of your time if you take a call with me. That's not a good use of my time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, it's get the personalization in there. The likelihood of me paying attention, let alone our prospects, far higher.
Lucas, any thoughts on personalization?
Yeah, I think personalization is really important, but when I say personalization, I guess it's a pretty broad term because so when you're talking about sort of the individual personalization about you as individually as a person, I think just what James was saying, it's only effective if you can do it really well to the point of like you find out there's a former sommelier, they just had a baby, something like that, or you have something genuine to say. I saw you volunteer for the Red Cross. I used to volunteer for them back in this city. We did incredible work doing blah, blah, blah. Like if it's just, oh, I saw you went to University of Delaware, Blue Hens, isn't that cool? Whatever. So I think if you're just BSing your way through it, it's not going to be effective. So where I typically point my team is if you can find one of those, great, use it. It's typically effective, but don't force it. And where I really push my team towards is organizational level personalization. For us, obviously, we're trying to find any organization that has a mature AI strategy. And the great thing about that for us is that a lot of organizations in this day and age want to publicize that. So if we can get understanding of what their current AI strategies are, what they're talking about, how they're leveraging that internally to what, for what business problems they're trying to solve, that gives us a lot of ammunition and a lot of information that we can utilize to try to start a conversation. Hey, saw you guys are doing this. That's really interesting. Here's how we're helping somebody do something really similar and actually expand beyond that to do blah, 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 tying it together. And I've always found that to be a bit more effective of, hey, the research that I found on you relates directly to the thing that I want to talk with you about versus, hey, I saw you went to this school. By the way, here's something about something completely different that has nothing to do with that I actually want to talk about.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like bringing it back in to be relevant to the person. I hate when SDRs prospect me like, oh, because I know you're experiencing these pains. I'm like, I'm not actually experiencing those pains. Like you have to
Mhm.
make it relevant to me to get my attention, whether it's University of Michigan or whatever, but relevant to my job as well. So if you're like, great, you're a Michigan fan, I don't care.
Yeah.
But it's here's how we help this university, like this might be. But yeah, if it comes back in and loops back around to what I'm doing, yeah, it's the same thing. We sat down with a friend who's a CISO in San Francisco at one point, and my SDR's heads are just blown away by some of the answers. It's not relevant to me personally. If you think you know what you're talking about and like you don't, or you claim that we've been in touch in the past, I will light you up on social media and in the professional networks that you're just a waste of time and everybody should block you. Yeah. It's a good point, Lucas.
Fantastic. Just checking on time here. I want to leave some time for Q&A, but like first, one of my big favorite parts of our webinars are hot takes. So we have 3 hot takes for James and Lucas today. Quick answer for each one, 30 seconds, 60 seconds max. But so first one, I'm probably asking the wrong people here, but I see that a lot on LinkedIn. Is the SDR model broken? Lucas, 30 seconds, 60 seconds.
Is the SDR model broken? No, I don't think it's broken. I think it's changed for sure. But I think we're still seeing organizations that are able to adapt to that change and able to take that change head on using SDRs very successfully. So the old model, yes, is broken, but there is a new model that I think organizations should be looking at and should be trying to take advantage of and modernizing and getting with the times. So relying on sort of those old, just pure email blasts, pure automation type approaches, firing from the hip, no longer going to work. Utilizing more personalization, being more targeted, being super relevant towards your ICP and towards the relevant personas, the ideal personas within those ICP accounts. That's what's going to make organizations really effective with SDRs moving forward.
James?
It used to be. And because sales development went from when I started to okay, It's a stepping stone before you go do something else in sales or marketing or wherever. Now it's a true career path. Now you got people who have been doing it their entire careers, less and less so. It can still be broken, yes, but people who've been doing this a long time can actually help create a model who've done the job before, who know how to align it to marketing and sales goals more and more. And it's also why you're seeing senior director VPs and senior VPs of sales development pop up in the tech industry. As long as somebody who's done it before, who's done the job before, or has partnered with a strong SDR leader to know what good looks like when you're creating an SDR model, it won't be broken. But people who have never done it before, never done the job before, have never partnered with a strong SDR leader, it's going to have some bumps and bruises along the way. But to the point Lucas brought up, it's not just okay, make dials and create opportunities. We need to be more of a strategic business partner to the overall business and have something that's aligned, but also SDRs know how to make their money, but also why they're doing it in the first place.
Absolutely. Second hot take, hiring for attitude over skill.
James, go ahead.
James, yeah, sorry.
I think skills you can learn. I would hire attitude for sure, because if the person brings the positive attitude, the right attitude to work 5 days a week, skills can be built. Attitude cannot.
I'd say some of the biggest mistakes I've made as a manager is seeing somebody's resume and basically being, this one's a no-brainer. This one's a plug and play. Let's get them in there. The attitude is a huge component of that. And definitely something that I'm looking for. In some situations, taking on folks that have no relevant experience, but how did they come prepared to the conversation? What did they do to understand what goes into the SDR role? How have they thought about how to take maybe what was seemingly irrelevant experience and actually say, hey, this is actually how it relates to that role. People who can think in that way are the people that I want to work with.
And the last hot take, lead scoring is outdated. Lucas, you want to go first?
So it's something that we're not even necessarily using too much at our organization right now, but we're working on really developing in a different way than I think what's been done historically. So to a degree, yes, it's outdated in a way that I think we should still be using scoring, but we should be thinking about it differently. You should be scoring more based on where the leads are coming from in terms of how much do these companies, these accounts, these personas match what you're going after. I would rather talk to somebody that is a white paper download, a very light touch within our sort of marketing realm, but is coming from our exact ideal account, than somebody who is all over the website going nuts from an organization that we don't really care about. So I think it's just about tweaking it from activity towards where is this person coming from and how relevant of a persona and how relevant of account are they to what we ideally want to target.
I think lead scoring is not outdated. I think to the point of the evolution of the SDR model, lead scoring had to be evolved as well. If you get marketing operations professionals on your team, it's like having a superpower. You get to basically to redefine every day, week, month, quarter, year, what a true lead is. And then you can have hierarchical prioritization of value of leads as it come in. Is it the end all be all, holy grail, silver bullet? Absolutely not. So you got to combine the inbound lead scoring process and the structure with intent. And then that is getting a big step forward compared to what historically has been available for SDRs, sellers, in SDR organizations as a whole. Leads usually, and back to the point earlier, is that leads, when you're getting a lead, if you've never spoken to the organization or the person before, they're probably way too far in the process of buying something for you to even fathom being first to the table.
Mhm.
So I think with lead scoring, I don't know how to do it, but combining it with intent so you can have a shot at being first to the table. I think that's where the future of it will go. But today, no, it's not broken. It's just been forced to evolve because the modern day buyer is so different than what we've been used to over the past 5, 10, 20 years.
Awesome. Good hot take session. We have 10 minutes left. Let's jump into the Q&A, and we'll kick it off with specific question for Lucas. Let's see if I can pull it up on the screen here. In the computer vision space, how do you actually define your ICP in a competitive market, in a highly technical market?
Such an important question because I think you have to think about ICP in a different way than you would in maybe other SaaS organizations where a lot of companies you're looking for lookalike companies based on certain firmographic pieces of information. Whereas for computer vision, for AI, what organization is working with AI, has an AI strategy, has a mature AI strategy, is completely individual to that organization. It's okay, we're working with John Deere. Let's go look at similar companies. It's not how it works. And that's one of the issues that I was tasked with tackling when I first came on board is how do we find the companies that have a mature AI strategy apart from us just Googling it nonstop every day. That's where we brought on a tool specifically for this called GetRev.ai. Great tool. Highly recommend it, where it does some more advanced web scraping, some of that firmographic data where you can try to better understand based on hiring tendencies, based on messaging put out by organizations themselves, based on the profiles of the employees within the companies. How likely are they to have this, have that, be doing this, be doing that? And one of the things we're looking with that tool is AI maturity, AI centricity of that organization, because it's not industry based, it's not geography based, it's not revenue based, not employee based. It's just, does that company have a strategy or not? Do they have a team in place or not? Do they have the right employees in place or not? And that's the way you need to think about it and look at it.
James, you're in a pretty competitive space as well. Do you have any ways you tackle your defining your ICP?
Cybersecurity has been around for a little longer than AI, formally at least. So it's a little bit more concrete, I guess you could say, at a certain level and up. CISOs, CIOs, CTOs. When you get to the mid-level ranked professionals in the cybersecurity space, it's actually a moving target these days. So the average cybersecurity professional is not in their role for very long, let alone these job titles that come out. You're just like, did your child create that job title? Like, how am I supposed to target that job title? And then the responsibilities are changing too. So you can have the same job title at 10 different companies and it's 10 different roles. And then you also have the kind of cross interdepartmental kind of collaboration where a role can actually report up through both InfoSec and RevOps or DevOps, excuse me. So it's like you're learning as you're going as a prospector and seller who the person who could be a low ranked person could be the final decision maker. You have no idea until you're doing the qualification, the discovery, and identifying who all is involved in the buying process. But that's also part of the beauty, I think, of sales development reps is that get them going, identify those accounts you want to focus on, identify those departments, and even especially for the high value accounts, map out almost like an org chart if you can of who reports to who, or at least get all the names of anybody who's going to be even touching, let alone looking at the solution if it rolls out when the deal closes.
All right, pulling up another question on the screen here. James, maybe you want to keep going. What changes have you implemented in your approach that have had a positive impact on your SDR's performance? Maybe James first, and then Lucas.
Wow. So that is a question I can probably answer for a long period of time. I always wanted to be the boss I never had when I was an SDR. And a large part was giving me a voice, giving me an opportunity to have an impact, not only from myself and my sales reps, but also my team. I got the opportunity really early on as an SDR. One of the big things was I naturally started trying to figure out what would be best for my sales reps when I was an SDR first time. And I came back as an SDR the second time, and we actually rebuilt a model based upon those best practices. I learned not only as an SDR, but future SDR leader of I was empowered and given a voice based on a repeatable model that I created myself. How can we do that? How can I empower the team members? So make sure that everybody has a voice. Everybody has an opportunity to voice that opinion. SDRs sometimes are a little shy. They don't want to voice it in front of leadership above me or another department. So have that kind of brainstorming session, the playback and elevate we call today at Venafi. to really empower them, bring value, share their experiences that kind of are stuck in a vacuum because we're all so remote. Also, I'd say bring them into conversations when you're doing kind of your GTM reviews of bring one or two team members in, because the data is the data. It doesn't tell the whole story. It helps ask questions, but you bring somebody in from the front lines to help answer those questions and tell the stories behind the why. I found that to be really helpful as well. And then end of the day, if you don't have it set up so SDRs can go to sales club or president's club, whatever you call it, do it. Insist upon it. Just put your foot down and bug your leadership to make sure that they are being celebrated at the same level as all the top performers in the company too. Those are high level across the board. And then last thing I'll say is give them an opportunity to go explore technologies that they like and bring that and present it to you, present it to the team to see if that could be beneficial for everybody, not just themselves.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the biggest things to look at is or to think about is advocacy. That's how I like to think about it sometimes. First and foremost, advocating for my team. And if there are roadblocks they're running into, if there are systems or processes that we have in place that generate challenges for them, trying to knock those roadblocks out of their way and challenging in some situations the status quo of why are we doing it this way? Because it doesn't seem to be generating the results that we want to generate. Like maybe on paper, yes, that's how it should look. This is ideally what it should generate, but it's not doing that. So what are we going to do moving forward to make this process better and create fewer challenges for the SDR team, just so we can check a box or something like that? One of the things we saw was implementing a stronger lead scoring model, because what we found with my team is they're spending a ton of time following up with a bunch of leads that ultimately were getting disqualified. We're not converting consistently into meetings scheduled, into pipeline, but those are the leads, that are opening. So we have to follow up with those. But why are those leads at opening? So asking questions like that and challenging the rest of the organization to work with you to make things better, I think is always an important thing, versus being like, that's the way it is, so we got to do it that way. And then advocating for themselves and teaching them that, helping them understand that they are a vital cog in this machine. They are not some assistant. They are not some pipsqueak. They are somebody who is contributing valuably to this organization. And I've seen situations where AEs were like, okay, cool, you set up this meeting. Don't come on this meeting. I don't want you there. No, you set up this meeting. You're a part of this conversation. You're working with this AE on this account. Be a part of that. Be present. Be asking questions. Help set up the next meetings from there, and communicate with your AE. How did that call go? What can we've done better? What can we be doing next? How can I help push this forward? Be a partner and not a subordinate, I think, is a really important thing for them to feel here.
Totally agree. I had an SDR once tell me a voice and visibility is far more valuable than a paycheck. And I'm like, okay, lesson learned. So if you're not learning from your team as much as they are from you, there's something wrong.
Fantastic. Thanks, James. Thanks, Lucas. I think we're up on time. I know we had a lot more questions, but hopefully we can answer some of these questions offline. But again, thank you, James. Thanks, Lucas, for joining us today. It was really helpful, insightful for me. And thank you. We appreciate it.
It's a
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.